Good day, everyone. I'm Laurie, and today we're going to tackle about feminist theory of Carol Gilligan. But before we jump to the main topic, let's take a look to the topic outline. So, for today's lesson, we're going to know more about Carol Gilligan and her contributions to psychology. Then, we're also going to talk about her theory, including her stages of morality or the ethics of care. And I'm going to show some example for you to understand more about her theory. And lastly, we will know about the level of thinking. To start, let's now talk about her professional life. Carol Gilligan was born in New York City on the 20th of November 1936. She studied in literature at Swarthmore College as an undergraduate. Carol then received an AB with highest honors in English literature from Swarthmore College. She earned her bachelor's degree in 1960 from Radcliffe with a master's in clinical psychology and a PhD in social psychology from Harvard University in 1964. Her landmark book, In a Different Voice, is described by a Harvard University president as a little book that started a revolution. 3 years later, Gilligan accepted a teaching position at Harvard, where she collaborated with Erik Erikson and Lawrence Kohlberg. While working as a research assistant for Kohlberg, who is well known for his theory of moral development, Gilligan began focusing on the moral dilemmas and development of young girls. Gilligan became the chair of gender studies at Harvard in 1997, and she co-directed the Harvard Project on Women's Psychology, Boys' Development, and the Culture of Manhood. And because of that, many institutions and organizations have recognized Gilligan for her contribution to the advancement of women and moral psychology. Talking about her contribution to psychology, Gilligan is a pioneer in the field of gender different psychology, which contends that men and women think in different ways, especially when it comes to moral issues. Carroll argues that these differences are most likely the result of social influences and gender conditioning, and she emphasizes that women's way of thinking are frequently undervalued compared to men's. However, some feminists have criticized Gilligan's emphasis on gender differences, arguing that focusing on differences between men and women can serve as justification for ongoing inequality. All in all, her well-known psychological contribution is her adaptation of Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Kohlberg's theory shows that children go through several stages of moral reasoning, though not everyone reaches the highest levels of moral reasoning, where justice and individuals' rights are guiding principles in a person's life. Colbert discovered that men were more likely than women to reach this stage of moral reasoning, and that men were more concerned with justice. Gilligan criticized this theory, claiming that it was biased in favor of men. Gilligan discovered in her own research that women place a greater emphasis on caring when making moral decisions. But Kohlberg's theory, which emphasizes justice, does not account for the role of caring in moral decision making, which is why women frequently fail to achieve what we call Kohlberg's highest stage of moral reasoning. Moving on to the concept of her theory, Carol developed her own theoretical ideas, primarily to demonstrate how men and women perceive moral understanding differently. She claimed that whereas boys' and men's morality is concerned with rules and abstract principles of justice, girls' and women's morality is concerned with care and compassion. She contrasted her caring morality with Kohlberg's justice morality, and she criticized Kohlberg for emphasizing only one side of the equation. Gilligan's book, which is a different voice, is an indictment of Freudian and Erikson's male-centered personality psychology, as well as Kohlberg's male-centered developmental psychology. Her complaint is not that it is unfair to exclude women from psychology. Her complaint is that it is not good psychology to leave half of the human population. Kohlberg's theory was observed to be based on moral thinking of privileged white men and boys. As a result, this hypothesis gained popularity by considering both male and female reasoning abilities. Kohlberg's idea, according to Carol Gilligan, are biased against male thought. She said that Kohlberg seemed to have researched only affluent men and boys, and she claimed that women face numerous psychological obstacles and are not moral widgets. Caring is central to women's spiritual growth, as shown by its effect on human relationships. Gilligan promotes the ethics of care as a necessary addition to, rather than a replacement of, Kohlberg's approach. But the question is, were women really moral widgets? What do you think? Let's find out the personal opinion of some theorists. Sigmund Freud thought women's moral sense was stunted because they stayed attached to their mothers, while Erik Erikson thought the tasks of development were separation from mother and the family. If women did not succeed in this scale, then they were obviously deficient. But Gilligan's reply was to assert that women were not inferior in their persona or moral development, but that they were different. They develop in a way that focused on connection among people rather than separation, and with an ethic of care for those people rather than an ethic of justice. So, in this part, we're going to explore the differences between Kohlberg's ethics of justice and Gilligan's ethics of care theories of moral development. Ideal adult moral growth is molded by Kohlberg as a method of growing abstraction and autonomy, whereas Gilligan's ideal moral adults are embedded in dynamic webs of caring relationships. Kohlberg is interested in the creation of abstract universal moral values, while Gilligan's moral reasoning is more contextual and grounded with the intention of taking ethical acts that promote both the self and the relationship with others. Kohlberg concludes that women's moral thinking skills may be lacking, but Gilligan disagrees, claiming that female moral thinking is just different rather than deficient. The care perspective is defined by the fundamental emphasis it places on the interpersonal relationship that are intimately linked to human nature's passions and affects the mother-child relationship is paradigmatic of all that is entailed in the care voice. It is linked to a sense of self-identity. The justice perspective, on the other hand, is associated with depiction of human beings as distinct bundles of desires and preferences. The fulfillment of these bundles of interest necessitates the consideration of another human being. These values and laws become associated with morality and therefore with justice. Now let's move on to the stages of morality. As a student of Kohlberg's, Gilligan was taken by the stage theory approach to understanding moral reasoning, but she disagreed with her mentor's assessment of the content of moral system within which people develop. She proposed a theory which has the same three stages of Kohlberg but with different stages of moral development. Though the names of the stages are the same, the stages differ in this method. In a pre-conventional level, a person in this stage cares for oneself to ensure survival. Though the person's attitude is selfish, this is the transition phase where the person finds a connection between oneself and others. In the conventional level, the person feels responsible and shows goodness towards other people. Carl Gilligan believes that this moral thinking can be identified in the role of a mother and a wife. This sometimes leads to the ignorance of the self. In a post-conventional level, this is a stage where the principle of care for self as well as others is accepted. However, a section of people may never reach this level. According to Carl Gilligan's theory of moral development, changes occur due to the change of self rather than the critical thinking. It was stated that the post-conventional level of Kohlberg is not attained by women, but Carl Gilligan researched and found that the post-conventional level of thinking is not being easy for women to go through because they care for their relationships. In order to understand Gilligan's theory, a popular example is usually considered. A group of moles give shelter to a porcupine, but they are being continuously stabbed by the porcupine's quills. Now, what should they do? The pre-conventional level of thinking states that to think for the good of oneself, either the moose or the porcupine only can live there. The other has to leave the place. And according to the conventional level of thinking, which brings a transition from self to the good of others, and which might even lead to sacrifice, either the moose or the porcupine has to sacrifice. And again, this leads to a stage where only moose or the porcupine can live in the burrow. And according to the post conventional level of thinking, which states that the good of both the parties has to be considered, both the moles and the porcupine come to an agreement that both will have separate places in the same burrow, where they limit to behave themselves and will not cause any trouble to other. This helped both of them to live in the same place with peace. Therefore, the solution of this scenario is different with different individuals, wherein gender also plays an important role. So the moles or the porcupine or the thinker were observed viewing the problem in two different perspectives, the care-based perspective and the justice-based perspective. In a justice-based perspective, the solution to the problem is viewed as a conflict between two individual groups. Only one of them can have the property. Either the moose or the porcupine will get the place in the burrow. Hence, the solution to the dilemma is not a resolution of the conflict, it is a verdict. In a care-based perspective, the approach differs. The problem is viewed as a difficult situation faced by both the parties together, rather than a fight between both of them. Hence, the solution is sought in a way around the problem or to remove the problem completely. The solution may sound compromising but not damaging. The relationship will still be the same after the resolution. And now we're here to the last part of this lesson. Let's gonna talk about the levels of thinking. Carl Gilligan states that the post-conventional level of moral thinking can be dealt based on the two types of thinking. Gilligan's theory is based on the two main ideas, the care-based morality, or usually found in women, and the justice-based morality, usually found in men. Care-based morality is the kind of thinking found in women. This is based on the following principles. More emphasis is given to interconnected relationship and universality. Acting justly focuses on avoidance of violence. Women with this are usually interested in helping others. More common in girls because of their connection to their mothers. Because girls remain connected to their mother, they are less inclined to worry about issues of fairness. In contrast, justice-based morality is a kind of thinking found in men. This is based on the following principles. First, they view the world as being composed of autonomous individuals who interact with one another. Acting justly means avoiding inequality. Individuals with this are usually interested in protecting individuality. Thought to be more common among boys because of their need to differentiate between themselves and their mothers. And because they are separated from their mothers, boys become more concerned with the concept of inequality. And that's all for this lesson. I hope you have learned something from this theory. Thank you so much for listening. Keep safe, everyone. God bless us all.